My brother's restaurant grand opening was supposed to be the proudest night of our family's life. I watched it burn from 1,200 miles away, and somehow, I was still the one expected to pay for the fire. Let me back up. My name is Claire, and I am a 32-year-old CPA living in Seattle. I have a one-bedroom apartment I own outright, a retirement account I have been feeding since I was 24, and a credit score that my father once described, without a trace of irony, as the family's greatest asset. He meant it as a compliment. It took me years to understand it was a warning. My brother Daniel is 28 and has never held a job longer than 14 months. Not because he isn't smart. Daniel is brilliant in the way that certain fires are brilliant, dazzling to look at, impossible to control, and inevitably destructive to everything around them. He has the kind of charisma that makes strangers hand him their business cards within 5 minutes of meeting him. He has the kind of charm that made my parents look at every one of his failures and say, "He just hasn't found his thing yet." 4 years ago, his thing was a food truck. My parents gave him $11,000. The food truck lasted one summer before the engine seized, and Daniel decided the universe was telling him to pivot. 3 years ago, his thing was a cryptocurrency trading platform he was going to build with 2 friends from the gym. My parents co-signed a personal loan for $8,000. The platform never launched. The friends stopped returning calls. Daniel said the market timing was wrong. 2 years ago, his thing was a clothing brand targeting conscious urban professionals. My mother quietly transferred $6,000 from their joint savings without telling my father. The brand produced 47 t-shirts that are currently in boxes in my parents' garage in Phoenix. Every single time, I watched from Seattle. I sent polite texts. I did not send money. My mother would call and say, "You know how Daniel is." My father would call and say, "Your brother needs support right now." I would say, "I love Daniel, but I'm not funding another idea without a business plan." There would be a long silence. Then the conversation would shift, and we would all pretend the ask had never happened. This was the rhythm of our family, Daniel dreamed. My parents enabled. I declined. Everyone moved on until the next dream. Then came Ember. Ember was not a food truck or a crypto app or a t-shirt brand. Ember was a restaurant. A real restaurant, Daniel said, with a Michelin-quality kitchen and a craft cocktail program and a private dining room that could be rented for corporate events. He had found a space in Scottsdale. He had a chef lined up. He had a designer. He had a business plan, he said. This time a real one, 40 pages with projected revenue and a 5-year growth model. He sent it to me in October. I read every page, twice. The projections were aggressive to the point of fantasy. He had assumed 90% table occupancy within the first 3 months. He had underestimated food costs by roughly 40%. His liquor licensing timeline was optimistic by at least 6 months, based on the current Arizona backlog. I wrote him 4 paragraphs of specific, concrete feedback. I told him I believed in his vision, but the numbers needed serious revision before he approached any lender. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji and never mentioned the feedback again. By December, my parents were electric with excitement. My mother was texting me photos of the interior renderings. My father was telling his golf buddies that his son was opening a fine dining establishment in Scottsdale. Christmas dinner was 90 minutes of Daniel holding court about farm-to-table sourcing and the hand-painted tile he had commissioned from an artist in Oaxaca. I smiled and passed the sweet potatoes and kept my concerns to myself because I had already said them and nobody had wanted to hear them. The opening was scheduled for the second Saturday in March. In the first week of February, my phone rang at 7 in the evening. It was my mother, which was not unusual. What was unusual was that she was whispering. "Mom, why are you whispering? Your father is in the other room," she said. "I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to stay calm." I set down my fork. Okay, Daniel ran into some trouble with the financing. The small business loan he applied for was smaller than he expected. "There's a gap." "How large a gap?" She paused. $38,000. I closed my eyes. "Mom, he's so close, Claire. The contractor has already started the build-out. The chef signed his contract. If they stop now, they lose everything they've already put in." "How much have they already put in?" Another pause. "Longer this time. Your father and I have contributed $60,000 over the past 8 months. The number hit me like cold water. $60,000. My parents' retirement savings, the account my father had been building for 30 years as a high school vice principal, was $60,000 lighter because of Ember. Mom, I know, she said quickly. I know. But this is real, Claire. This is not the food truck. You've seen the renderings. You know how hard he has worked. I know how hard the contractor has worked, I said carefully. I need to think about this. Of course, she said. But sweetheart, the contractor needs an answer by Friday. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in the dark and ran numbers in my head the way I always do when I am anxious, finding comfort in the arithmetic, even when the arithmetic was bad. $38,000 was not nothing to me. It was not catastrophic either. I had it. That was precisely the problem. My family knew I had it. I decided by morning that the answer was no. I called my mother back and told her I was sorry, that I loved Daniel, but I could not in good conscience fund a business whose financials I had serious concerns about. I told her I hoped he found another solution. I told her I would be at the opening regardless, cheering the loudest person in the room. She said she understood. She said she would pass it along. I should have known that was not the end of it. With my family, it is never the end. March arrived. The opening was on a Saturday. I flew into Phoenix on Friday afternoon, picked up a rental car, and drove to my parents' house in Chandler. The energy in the house was frantic and celebratory at the same time, the way a house feels the morning before a wedding when everyone is already one decision away from tears. My mother was in a new dress. My father was wearing a sport coat I had never seen before. Daniel came by to pick up the family at 6, and he looked, I will give him this. He looked like a man who had built something. His eyes were bright, and his handshake was firm, and he hugged me longer than he normally does. You're gonna love it, he said into my shoulder. I know I am, I said, and I meant it. Ember was beautiful. I will say that without qualification. The hand-painted tile was exactly as extraordinary as Daniel had promised. The lighting was warm and low, and the kitchen was open and gleaming. The chef came out during cocktail hour and talked about the menu with the kind of quiet confidence that makes you immediately trust the food. My parents were glowing. My aunts and uncles moved through the space taking photos. Daniel worked the room like he had been born to do exactly this. For 3 hours, I let myself believe it might be okay. I flew back to Seattle on Sunday morning. I had an audit beginning Monday. I put Ember and Daniel and my parents' retirement account into the compartment in my brain where I store things I cannot control, and I closed the door, and I went to work. For 6 weeks, I heard nothing alarming. My mother sent photos of full dining rooms. Daniel posted on social media every few days, a new dish, a mention in a local food blog, a private event that had booked the back room. I allowed myself to feel cautiously optimistic. I allowed myself to think that maybe this time was different. Then, on a Tuesday morning in late April, my phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Pacific time. It was a number I did not recognize, with a 602 area code. Phoenix. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered it. Is this Claire? A woman's voice, professional, flat. Yes. Who is this? My name is Patricia Holloway. I am a collections specialist with Meridian Business Lending. I am calling regarding a commercial line of credit opened in January of this year. The account is currently 63 days past due. I am looking at the primary borrower on this account. A pause. The name on the application is Claire. The room tilted. I'm sorry, I said very slowly. Can you say that again? She spelled out my full name. She read back my social security number, the last 4 digits, which matched. She read back an address, my Seattle apartment. She read back my date of birth. Miss Claire, the outstanding balance on this account is $41,200. We've made several attempts to reach you at this number and at the email on file. I have never, I said, and I had to stop and start again because my voice was doing something I did not want it to do. I have never applied for a business line of credit with Meridian Business Lending. I have never heard of your company before this phone call. Silence on her end. The application was submitted online in January, she said carefully. It was approved on January 19th. January 19th. 6 weeks before the opening of Ember. 6 weeks after my mother called me whispering about a $38,000 gap. Miss Holloway, I said. I need you to note on this call that I am disputing this account in its entirety. I am the victim of identity fraud. I did not open this account. I did not authorize this account. I am going to need you to send me everything you have, the application, the IP address, the supporting documents, everything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I am noting that. We'll pause collection activity pending investigation. But Miss Claire, I want to be transparent with you. The debt is valid until the dispute is resolved, and resolution can take 60 to 90 days. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed for 4 minutes without moving. I know it was 4 minutes because I watched the clock on my nightstand. I was not crying. I was not panicking. I was doing the thing I always do, which is building a structure around the chaos, finding the edges of the problem so I could see its shape. The shape was ugly. I opened my laptop and logged into my credit monitoring service. I had not checked it since January because my finances were automated and I had no reason to. The dashboard loaded, and I saw 3 hard inquiries from January, all clustered within 4 days of each other. Meridian Business Lending, a commercial kitchen equipment lessor, a restaurant supply company. All 3 had been opened using my information. The total liability across all 3 accounts was $55,600. My hands were steady when I picked up my phone. I noticed this and filed it away. I had heard people describe moments of betrayal as feeling hot, explosive, operatic. This felt like the opposite. It felt like standing in a room that has just had all the air removed. Very quiet, very clear, no heat at all. I called my brother. He answered on the 3rd ring, sounding loose and easy the way he always does in the morning. Hey sis, what's up? I just got a call from a collections company, I said, about a business line of credit in my name. $41,000. Do you know anything about that? The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds too long. Collections? They weren't supposed to. He stopped. Daniel, Claire. Listen. Do not, I said. Tell me to listen. Tell me what you did. He exhaled. When he spoke again, the loose, easy morning voice was gone, and what replaced it was something younger and smaller and desperately calculating. He told me that the gap in financing had not been $38,000. It had been closer to $60,000. He told me that the small business loan had come back far lower than expected, and the contractor had threatened to walk, and the chef's contract had a penalty clause, and he had panicked. He told me he had used my information because my credit score was 812 and his was in the low 500s, and he had not thought it would be a problem because Ember was going to make money. It was already making money. He had just needed to get through the first quarter, and then he was going to pay everything off and transfer the accounts out of my name, and I was never going to know. You were never going to know, he repeated, as though that was the comforting part. Who else knows? I asked. Another pause. Mom helped me pull your information. She remembered your social from when she used to do your taxes when you were in college. And Dad doesn't know the details, but he knew we were handling the gap. My mother had given my brother my social security number. My mother, who had called me whispering in February, who had said she understood when I said no, who had kissed me on the cheek at the Ember opening and told me how proud she was of me. She had handed my identity to my brother like a tool. I need you to not contact me for the rest of today, I said. Claire, I am not asking. I hung up. I called my employer's legal referral line and was connected to an attorney who specialized in financial fraud within the hour. I laid out the situation with the same flat precision I use when I am walking a client through an audit finding. The attorney's name was Marcus Webb, and he had a voice like someone who has heard every possible version of human disappointment and is no longer surprised by any of them. He told me what I already suspected. What my brother had done was wire fraud. What my mother had facilitated was identity theft. Both were federal crimes. He told me I had 3 options, and he laid them out without editorializing. Option 1. Do nothing, dispute the accounts through the standard process, absorb the credit damage, and hope the lenders eventually ruled in my favor. Option 2. File a civil suit against my brother for the full amount of the fraudulent debt and pursue recovery through the courts. Option 3. File a criminal complaint with the FTC and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, which would trigger a federal investigation given that the fraud involved wire transfers and multiple financial institutions across state lines. I told him I needed 24 hours. I want to be honest about those 24 hours, because I think people who have not been in this kind of situation imagine the choice is simple. They imagine that being defrauded by your own family makes the decision obvious. It does not. It makes the decision the hardest thing you will ever do, because the fraud and the love are not separate things. They are braided together so tightly that you cannot pull one thread without unraveling the other. I sat with my coffee that evening, and I thought about Daniel at 8 years old, the way he used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and press his cold feet against my shins without asking because he knew I would not send him away. I thought about my mother braiding my hair before school every morning, from kindergarten through 5th grade, the particular gentleness of her hands. I thought about my father at my college graduation, the way he had gripped my diploma as though it were something sacred. I sat with all of that. I let it be real. I did not pretend it away. And then I thought about my name on 3 fraudulent financial accounts. I thought about $55,000 of debt I had not agreed to carry. I thought about my credit score, which I had spent a decade building with the same discipline and patience I brought to everything else in my life. I thought about my mother whispering on the phone in February, telling me Daniel needed a gap filled, already knowing that if I said no, she had another plan. They had not asked for my help. They had taken it. By the time I went to bed, I knew what I was going to do. The next morning, I called my parents before I called anyone else. My father answered. I told him I knew everything. I told him I knew about the accounts, about my social security number, about the equipment leases and the supply company, and the total liability of $55,600. I told him calmly and without raising my voice, and I waited. He did not deny it. That surprised me. He said, "We were going to tell you once the restaurant stabilized." "That's not how any of this works, Dad. Claire, if you report this, your brother loses the restaurant. He could go to jail. Your mother could—" "Dad," I said, "you used my identity without my consent. That is not a family problem. That is a federal crime." "You're really going to do this," he said. "Not a question. A verdict." "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "You did this. I am responding to what you did." He said something then that I did not expect. He said, "We always knew you'd be fine. You're always fine. You don't need us the way Daniel does." I had to breathe through that one. I had to breathe through it because it was possibly the truest and most devastating thing my father had ever accidentally said out loud. They had built their entire justification on the assumption that I was fine and Daniel was fragile, and therefore my resources existed to bridge the gap between those two states. They had never once asked whether being the one who is always fine had cost me anything. They had simply assumed the cost was acceptable because I was the one paying it. "I love you, Dad," I said. "I'll be in touch through my attorney." I filed the fraud reports with the FTC that afternoon. Marcus Webb filed the criminal complaint with the FBI Financial Crimes Division by the end of the week. I disputed all 3 accounts with the credit bureaus and submitted my documentation, the IP addresses on the applications, none of which were mine, my own location data from January showing I had been in Seattle the entire month, my passport stamps. I froze my credit at all 3 bureaus. I changed every password, every PIN, every security question. The calls started almost immediately. My aunts, my uncle in Tucson, my parents' closest friends who had been at the Ember opening and who now apparently felt qualified to weigh in on my family's financial crimes. My cousin Rachel, who texted me 7 times in one afternoon with variations on the phrase, "You're destroying this family." My mother called 40 times the first day, and then stopped when she realized I had blocked her number. The texts I did read, before I blocked everyone, shared a common theme. I was cold. I was selfish. I did not understand what family meant. Daniel was working so hard. My mother was not sleeping. Did I understand what the stress was doing to my father's heart? Was I really going to let pride destroy 32 years of family over money? Over money. As though the money were the point. As though what had been taken from me was purely financial. What they had taken was my name, my history. The 812 credit score that represented a decade of choices I had made carefully and correctly while watching my family make the opposite choices and bail each other out and call that love. They had taken my name and signed it to debts I did not know existed, and then called me cold when I refused to pretend it had not happened. I blocked everyone who was not my attorney. The silence after the blocking was enormous. I want to describe it accurately because I think it matters. It was not peaceful. Not at first. It was the silence of a house after an explosion. When the ringing in your ears is so loud it sounds like quiet. I sat in my apartment in Seattle, which I had purchased with my own money and furnished slowly over 4 years with things I had chosen because I liked them, and I listened to that silence, and I let myself grieve. I grieved the graduation photo on my parents' mantle. I grieved Christmas dinners, and my mother's sweet potato casserole, and the particular way my father laughs when something catches him genuinely off guard. I grieved the version of Daniel that used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I grieved the family I had thought I had, and I gave myself the full weight of that grief because I think you have to. I think if you skip the grief, you just carry it somewhere else. Somewhere it can do more damage later. I grieved. And then I got up and made dinner. 6 months later, and I want to include this because so many people in situations like mine never get to say what happened next. This is where things stand. The FBI investigation is ongoing. Marcus Webb tells me these things move slowly, and I should not expect resolution before next year. Ember closed in June, 7 weeks after the investigation began. The equipment leasing company repossessed the kitchen appliances. The landlord kept the deposit. All 3 fraudulent accounts remain in dispute, and 2 of the 3 lenders have already issued preliminary rulings in my favor, pending final documentation. My credit score dropped to 741 during the dispute process. It is back to 796 as of last month and climbing. My brother called me once from a number I did not recognize. I answered by accident. He said my name and then stopped as though he had not planned anything after that. I said, "I hope you're okay, Daniel." "I genuinely do." Then I hung up and blocked the number. My father sent a letter through the mail, handwritten, 3 pages. I read it once. He did not apologize for the fraud. He apologized for the stress the situation had caused the family. I understand the distinction, and I think it tells me everything I need to know about where we are. My mother has not contacted me. I have a therapist now, which I probably should have had years before any of this happened. She has a theory about families like mine, about the architecture of them, how they always build one child to be the foundation, and one child to be the visible structure, and how the foundation spends so many years being load-bearing that it forgets it was also supposed to be a person. I think about that a lot. I am learning to be a person. Last month, I took 2 weeks off work and drove up the coast to Vancouver Island. I rented a small cabin on the water, and I cooked my own meals, and I read 6 novels, and I watched the tide go in and out, and I did not think about credit scores or fraud investigations or the particular silence that follows when you block your entire family in an afternoon. I thought about the water and the herons, and the way the fog sits on the tree line in the morning like it is in no particular hurry to go anywhere. It was the first vacation I had taken in 4 years. The first time in longer than I can remember that my phone was quiet not because I had turned it off, but because there was simply no one left who needed something from me. I am telling this story because I spent a long time believing that loyalty meant absorbing whatever your family required of you, that love was measured by how much damage you could take without flinching. I believed this so completely that I could not see how deep the pattern went until the pattern had my name on it in 3 separate fraudulent financial documents. Here is what I know now. Love does not use your social security number without asking. Love does not forge your signature. Love does not call you cold for holding it accountable. Love does not require you to disappear so that someone else can be visible. What my family had was not love. It was a system, and I was the part of the system that was never supposed to stop working. I stopped working. I am figuring out what comes next. Some mornings that feels like freedom, and some mornings it feels like standing in a very large empty room trying to figure out what the room is for. Both of those things can be true at the same time, I think. My therapist says that is actually the point, that the room being empty is not the problem. The room being empty is the beginning. I am beginning.